Have you ever felt like your body is trying to tell you something, but no matter how many doctors you've seen, how many supplements you've taken, or how many lifestyle changes you've made, you still don't feel like yourself? Maybe it's fibroids, maybe it's digestive issues, maybe it's chronic inflammation, maybe it's exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. Or maybe your body has been waving red flags for years and nobody has helped you understand what they're actually saying. Here's something most women are never told. Symptoms don't always begin in the body. Sometimes they begin in the patterns we've normalized: the stress, the self sacrifice, the perfectionism, the pushing through, the survival mode. And over time, the body begins carrying what the mind never fully processed. And later in this conversation, today's guest is going to explain why many people unknowingly recreate the same painful experiences throughout their lives, and how one 4-day vision quest alone without food or water completely transformed the way he understands healing. If you've ever felt trapped in patterns you can't explain, you're going to want to stick around for this. But before we dive into this episode, y'all already know what time it is. Vibe with me, y'all.
Welcome to the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast.
Y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast. Today, we're talking about emotional healing, the nervous system, chronic stress, body awareness, and why your symptoms may not be random. Because healing often begins when we stop fighting our body and start listening. Y'all, it's your Healthy Habits and Lifestyle Coach Jovonnie, and I'm here with Ben. Welcome to the Good Vibe Studio, Ben.
Hey, Jovonnie. Great to join you today.
Doing good. Ben, for more than 35 years, you've been helping people heal emotional wounds, chronic stress, digestive issues, fibroids, autoimmune challenges, and deep emotional suffering through meditation and body awareness and healing traditions rooted in Native American and Taos wisdom. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what got you started, what attracted you towards this level and this vibe of healing.
Just from early, maybe 3-4 years old, those days our parents used the television set as the babysitter. So when the cowboy and Indian movies were on, I would be screaming and throwing fits when the Native people were getting killed off. But the fascination continued to grow, and I would be checking out whole stacks of books from the university library as a teen. And when I learned of the Native American vision quests, or the traditional doctors, the practices that they would go through and the gifts they possessed. There was also a substantial Native American community in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I was living at the time. And so I would go to the powwows, but at 17, I'd already been saving up, and I hauled ass out of Texas and I made it as far as Oklahoma and landed in a community of predominantly Kiowa Indians and started going into the peyote meetings, sitting up all night with Native elders. And that's where I met my mentor, Horace Delkai, one of their last surviving traditional doctors, who transmitted portions of his own healing gifts to me. And traditionally, you go through the vision quest, which entails fasting the 4 days and nights alone in the mountains without food and water. I started that when I was training with my mentor. But then there's a gap, my wandering alone in the desert for, metaphorically, for much of my 20s. And then turning 30 is like, I need to go back. And so since 1993, I've been going to the Wichita Mountains in the spring and fall. So you could do the math, but just like clockwork, returning to the vision quest. I've gone through dozens now. And it's something that keeps deepening. There are times during the vision quest where I feel this extraordinarily powerful presence descend into my body. And parts of it have felt like a near-death experience. I would be living traumas going back to my childhood, adolescence, some of which I'd completely forgotten. And yet it'd all be flooding back, the vivid memories and all the sensory impressions and emotions tied to it. And I could literally feel myself digesting what I was carrying and a new foundation taking shape. Native Americans had some of the most powerful healers anywhere on the planet. Just, I mean, I've watched my mentor as he do things like he'd be closing open wounds, and there are people with suffer from heart disease or stroke or cancer, and I'd see people even who weren't expected to live, and as a result of his intervention, they would recover. And they refer to these gifts as medicine, these powers that all of these doctors possessed. And there was a specialization, like they were known for their areas of specialization, and people would seek out a particular doctor based on his or her medicine or the gift that that individual possessed. And sometimes would travel from great distances, even the allied tribes way off at a distance could be hundreds and hundreds of miles away, but there's this exchange. People travel back and forth, and so you'd hear about someone who's like, okay, so like some of the people in the northern Pueblo villages would travel all the way to Arizona to work with one of the Hopi doctors in the middle of Arizona.
So that fourth night, you said something really changed for you, something really shifted. And you started understanding there was some emotional trauma that you had to wrestle with. And you just kind of mentioned it. You said you were kind of digesting some of those flashbacks and things that were happening to you. How did that change the way you understood healing, being someplace 4 days, 4 nights on a vision quest, 17 years old, right? What did that look like for you?
The first actual vision quest was at 20.
Okay. So those 3 years, you were just vibing with the Native Americans. You did.
Yeah.
Were they welcoming? Like you just showed up and they were just like, "Hey, come on in." Like, what did that look like?
Oh, it was mixed. One of my peers, I was at his home, and the elderly man who took him in and raised him, my friend says, "Hey, Dad, Ben wants to go into the peyote meetings." And usually they don't allow non-natives, or at least they didn't there, to go in. And for some reason, this elderly man, Jack, I just thought for a second, says, "Okay," and just let me come in. And some of the other native elders pushed back. And Jack said to the others, "This one is different. Let him come in." And because they, had a lot of respect for him, they deferred to his authority. And then training with my mentor, I was terrified that he would say, "Well, this only works for Native people. Sorry, I can't help you. Good luck there." And when I approached him at 20 and like physically shaking, I'm sitting in the car with him, and it was like, "I want to learn to do what you're doing." And he didn't say yes or no. He says, "What are you doing this weekend? Can you start fasting?" I'm still shaking. I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And he has me drive down into the Wichita Mountains, sitting in my car that time, not eating or drinking for the next 2 days and nights. That was just a test to determine if I was serious. And then we spoke after I met him, a few days later. And he said, when you finish your semester, come on out to New Mexico. And he's living on the Navajo reservation with his wife. And that's where the apprenticeship began. Out there, I was staying with him at his home on the reservation. Yeah.
Okay, so you were in college at the time. He said, "Go ahead and finish your semester."
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, so you're getting a traditional education in the Western world, but you're drawn to Native American healing, medicine, as they referred it to.
Yeah.
And you're seeing somewhat like miracles, healing practices be done where people are terminally ill or really struggling with some type of health issue. And you're seeing the different transformational practices being done that's helping people. Something I want to ask you, Ben, is why do you think so many women become disconnected from their bodies in the first place?
God, it's
Because I know
both.
you said you work with women who've had experiences with fibroids. So we're talking all these different things you're healing people, you're seeing and witnessing. You embark on this healing journey and voyage to be able to become someone that also helps other people heal. Why do you think so many women become disconnected from their bodies in the first place?
It's both genders, actually. It varies, like the impact varies according to gender, because our physiology is a bit different. But I'll see, uh, having female reproductive organs, ovaries, the uterus, all that, and then I think, hormonally too. There's, or not just think, I know hormonally that there's differences in terms of how it impacts, but basically the fact that we could have these lived experiences, whether traumatic or adverse, and the fact that the vast majority of people have never learned to work effectively with their own emotions. And as a young child, if we're experiencing a lot of this trauma, adversity, which many of us do, is we don't have the understanding or even capacity with which to work with our emotional responses. But then growing up, growing into adolescence and adulthood, and the relational dynamics, I tend to work, I think it's something like 40-60. So I think it's something like about 60% women that I work with. And for some reason too, it's easier for me to relate to women than it is to men generally. I mean, if a man is into like geopolitics and some of the lineage-based spiritual practices or traditions and well-traveled and all that, okay, that's a different story. But in many ways, I generally find it easier to relate to women. But a lot of the relational dynamics, some of the what are good examples? Some of the controlling, abusive behaviors that women end up dealing with are being a doormat or being caretaking a lot of these roles, and also seeing and working with women who work in the corporate world and various professional women. And with a lot of that stress and toxicity in that environment, and I'll see a lot of that. And this could, a lot, men and women, I'll see a lot of that accumulate, like that stress in the abdomen, in the digestive tract. But then with women, I'll see at times more of that held in the uterus and ovaries, reproductive organs, and that could be the work-related stress and a lot of the relational stress, a lot of the toxic relational dynamics and the stress from that accumulates within these reproductive organs.
And I'm really glad you brought that up, because yes, men and women are definitely different, but how those reproductive organs translate the energy, the emotions, the feelings, the trauma, the experiences, the patterns are totally different. And it leads into sometimes those chronic conditions, fibroids, adenomyosis, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. It impacts the body in different ways. And that's why I really wanted you to be able to break that down, because lived experiences are very much so true, powerful when it comes to our body, physically, emotionally, mentally. And I think we don't talk enough about those experiences, and we just feel like the body is just doing whatever the body wants to do and how it's relating. And so I like that you talked about some of those relational dynamics. You said controlling, abusive behaviors, sometimes utilized as a doormat. Maybe they're a caretaker, they're taking care of everyone else. The corporate pressure or professional pressures to perform in the workspace, or to just show up when you can't even barely show up to take care of yourself. And then stress. I think those are very important things to talk about, because disconnection is often a survival skill before it becomes a health problem. And a lot of times those situations and experiences, women are trying to just survive, and that's all they can do to get through, versus getting to the other side and realizing, okay, this survival skill it's starting to really be a pattern and an infestation into my body that I need to uproot, or I'm going to now start having chronic health problems, chronic health conditions. My body's going to start communicating to me in a different way. And I think that's really important. Y'all, right now, I want you to check the show notes. Check the show notes, take the Spot Your Triggers quiz, because I want you to be able to understand what patterns in your lifestyle that you're currently living might be fueling your inflammation, your pelvic pain, your bloating, your fatigue. It might be in how you're living. So I want you to get to know yourself a little bit more. Take the show notes and take the Spot Your Triggers quiz. And remember, this episode of the Empire Place, Empire Lives podcast is brought to you by Forward Vibrations. Let's get back into the conversation. So, Ben, one thing I see over and over is women who have learned that survival mode is just what they have to do, but they never learn how to stay connected to themselves. They're managing everyone else's needs while their own are eventually just going without being addressed. And eventually their body starts speaking up more and more. You've worked with women dealing with fibroids, digestive issues, IBS, ovarian cysts, autoimmune conditions, and chronic stress. What do you believe the body is trying to communicate to them through those symptoms?
I don't know for sure that the body is saying like, oh, here's what I need to say to you. It's more like the body is just, when we have these lived experiences, it elicits a powerful emotional response. And our bodies store both the impressions of these traumatic or adverse experiences or chronic stress, all that, and then there's our emotional response to it. And what we are unable to digest, our lived experiences, our emotional responses, we need to be able to digest it like the food we eat. And what we are not able to digest, we carry in the body. It leaves this residue. I see it, I feel it every day in people. I mean, I feel it in myself. I mean, we're all human. And so I do practice every day to work to digest that. And then that's a big part of the reason I continue to go on the vision quest. And in between, I'll do other things. I do tissue body work. I make use of a number of tools, because this is, we're not living the easiest lives. Many of us are not. We're faced with all kinds of challenges. And so what happens is when we carry these, especially like we grow up and in families, and there's all this insidious dysfunction, and sometimes we're subjected to trauma too. And that has effects on multiple levels, like the biochemical makeup of the brain, biochemical processes, the development of the neurostructure of the brain, in our endocrine system hormonally, on so many levels. And then I'll see a lot of the stress and adversity, and it will express itself in various ways in terms of the organs. And there's all these complex functions that are, and a lot of it's governed by our endocrine system and our brain's neurochemistry. But even someone going on, let me give you an example, like taking SSRIs, antidepressants, and there's something referred to genital anesthesia. So people take the SSRIs and it, over time, there's this loss or inability to experience sexual desire and pleasure. And so our bodies, our minds, our brains, it's such a highly complex system. And so like the medication, which I just gave you an example of, can affect these biochemical processes that occur within our brain that govern functioning of our sexual function. The traumatic and other adverse experiences and chronic stress can also affect our biochemistry in all these like very complex processes, and that can lead to this manifestation or development of various physical pathologies in the body. And just the fact that the stress itself, as another example is just the fact that we accumulate so much stress and anger if we're not working with our emotions. Anger is just one of many emotions that can accumulate. And so much of that accumulates in the digestive tract. And then as I'm working with people, it's, because I work with a lot of people over the years with IBS and Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and other, impacted bowel, kinds of digestive distress. And a lot of that comes out in the course of working with these individuals. These emotions surface. And so it's a combination of addressing the physical crises, and at the same time, there's all this emotional fallout, that all this residue that's held in the body, and it's all coming out. Often they're being flooded with it. And so there's addressing the physical symptoms and at the same time helping them to work with the emotional component, because you can't really separate it. It's all connected.
Very much so. Definitely connected. I want y'all to comment the word digest. Digest in the comments if you're vibing with us on YouTube and watching the video version of this podcast. And if you listen on your favorite podcast distribution platform and it's the audio, make sure you hit follow and leave a rating. But put digest. That was really powerful, Ben, reminding us that we must digest our experiences, or it would be carried throughout the body, stored in the body in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And so digesting those emotional, mental, the experiences, the lived experiences in your life are very important. If not, these are going to translate, manifest, show up in different dis-ease because of the state that your body is in. Ben, what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask you about maybe 3 different ways that you kind of approach digesting lived experiences on a regular basis. Because I know you talked about, you mentioned briefly while you were explaining how there's practices, things that you do daily to make sure that you're addressing these lived experiences. Can you give the listeners maybe 3 ways that you approach digesting lived experiences?
I would say the main way, what I do is, and the practice I share with people, and there are many different versions of it, but the basic practice involves acknowledge what's happening. What is it? The circumstance that you're dealing with or situation you find yourself in, the relational dynamic, if you are in some kind of toxic or dysfunctional dynamic, and it's affecting you, it's triggering you emotionally, it's evoking all kinds of stress and unpleasant feelings. Start by acknowledging, 1, what's happening. 2, what do you feel in response to it? What are the actual feelings? Is it sadness, grief, anger, frustration, overwhelm, intimidation? It could be a whole range of emotional responses. These are just a few of many possibilities. And where are these feelings and bodily sensations situated within your body, within your throat, down in your abdomen, deep within your chest or some other part of your body? And then, to the best of your ability, bring as much awareness as you possibly can to where these feelings or bodily sensations are located, and immerse your awareness. Feel like you're going into the depths of it all. You're not trying to change it or make it go away, just let it be what it is. And fully immersed within the depths of these feelings, begin to breathe as softly and deeply as you can. Breathe all the way down to your abdomen, expanding your abdomen, then your rib cage. Not forcing it, but just as deeply as you comfortably can. Then hold it briefly. And then exhale as fully as you can, very slowly, softly. Pause again. And continue the cycle. Now, when I had in my mid-20s, the traumas of my childhood and adolescence were resurfacing. And I was fortunate because it didn't express itself through my body. I didn't have like some individuals with these autoimmune disorders and the body is just shutting down and failing to function. My body was still pretty resilient. Yet the extent of the emotions I experienced at the time were overwhelming and at times excruciatingly painful. Yet I would drop my awareness deep into the depths of what I was feeling, and sometimes I would breathe for hours at a time. And it depends on the individual. I mean, lots of folks maybe only have 10 or 15 minutes. If that's what time you have, okay, do that. But some of these long-standing, deeply embedded emotional wounds, the traumas that we carry, these wounds run extraordinarily deep. And if you're in some kind of chronic, really toxic, dysfunctional situation, you're in a relationship and it's leaving you, you're being subjected to a lot of abuse or just really toxic behavior, then that it's an ongoing stress. And when you stay in that and you continue to tolerate or have to endure those behaviors, because sometimes we get in situations we can't just easily just get up and walk away from. It's, especially maybe if there are children in the picture too. You know, there's so many things we're trying to hold it together. We're doing the best we can just to survive and get through life. And there's the whole of the economic realities that we're facing now with, you know, at the moment there's the war in Iran and fuel prices are rising, food prices and everything. So, and all of these things impact us. And this is why I do such extensive practice. I generally spend a few hours a day just dropping into this, because if you consider like what we're dealing with on a daily basis, what we carry historically, many of us carry from childhood and adolescence, but then what we're dealing with in our present day, it's a lot. And the thing is, you mentioned 3 practices, so I'm going to expand on this. There's the sitting practice, but okay, a lot of your listening audience and people in general, a lot of us have so damn much to do. We have so many things we have to hold together, so you can't sit that long. What I've learned as I've over the years is by doing practice is that I bring this into my other parts of my life. You know, so whether times when I'm driving, just make sure you can keep your eyes on the road and be aware of other cars around you. Cleaning house. One woman that I've worked with for some time, the babysitter failed to show up when we had a phone session. Her daughter was sitting in her lap as I had her doing practice. The daughter fell asleep, thankfully. And I'll do walking meditation. You know, just if you have to walk somewhere, for instance, or just get out of the house because you just need to take a break from what you're dealing with, that reality for a moment. And even that, what I found is because some of the stresses, the challenges, the overwhelm we're experiencing, when I got out walking, a lot of the emotions that normally remain bottled up in the body, what I found is that, you know, like we all have this, say, electromagnetic field around the body. I could feel it extend outwards. And the emotions that normally remain deeply condensed in the body, pent up, I could feel that expand through that field surrounding my body. It was less contracted and all this stress and emotions were circulating, and it made it easier to digest them. The bilateral motion of walking stimulates the 2 hemispheres of the brain, so that helps with the processing. And the earth has its own grounding electromagnetic field, and that also helps with that cleansing or purification of a lot of these stresses and very heavy emotions that a lot of us are carrying.
I like that you really took the time to walk us through what that looked like, Ben, and what it could potentially look like. Because we always know your healing, your journey, what works for you is going to work for you. And I'm also glad that you broke it down. Like, not everyone has hours within their
Yeah,
day that they are able to identify to
yeah,
truly dedicate for these practices. So, one, you said acknowledge what's happening.
uh,
That's powerful, because when you're aware and you're able to acknowledge, multiple things can shift for you. You can evolve your programming, your wiring, all the things that you are used to doing. Like, acknowledgement is really powerful to be able to let you know what's actually happening. It's giving you data on yourself,
yeah,
of what's happening. Two, what do you feel in response to it?
mm,
Now it's not just acknowledging what's happening. Now it's, how am I truly feeling right now?
yeah,
And I think that's really powerful. And then three, you said, where are they being expressed in my body? Now, is it the pelvic pain on
yeah,
my right side? Is it pain in my chest? Is it in my leg? Is it in my hip? Where is this pain, or where is this response to what is happening being expressed in my body? And then you said, immerse yourself in that awareness in your body and actually do some breath work to really
yeah,
acknowledge where at that source in your body, you need to send some positive emotion to, some oxygen flow, some attention to, some love, some light, some care, some tenderness, to that space. And I think that's really important. But I also appreciate you kind of talking about what some of those practices look like. So that's the thought process and the steps you can take. But then
yeah,
it's the sitting practices that you utilize. It could be the walking meditation just to get up and go. That could be while you're at work. It could be something you do before you even get your day started, towards the end of your day. There's so many different ways that you can just meditate. It could just be walking around in your house for that stillness, that focus, and to give yourself the opportunity just to prioritize your well-being. And I think that's really important. And so I'm really glad you broke that down, Ben, because it goes right back to that response to the stress, that ongoing pattern of how we're either pushing through, or we're self-abandoning ourselves, or we're not allowing the lived experience to truly be digested and in us, so we're able to process it in the right way, understand what those capacities and skill sets are, so we can find a way forward. And so I think that's really important. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because healing begins when we stop abandoning ourselves to keep everything else going, because survival mode just keeps us functioning. And there's a time and a place where it's time to not just be functioning, but really get in a place where we're able to thrive, where we're really truly living and we're aware of ourselves, we love ourselves, we're caring for ourselves, and we're advocating for what it is that we need, because our body is the one thing that we get and we don't get a new one. But
yeah.
it's going to pay a price to continue to abandon and not be able to truly address what's actually happening in your healing. For the women listening right now, Ben, the women with fibroids, with chronic inflammation, with digestive issues, with fatigue, or years of emotional stress, where does that healing actually begin for them?
There's so many components to it. It's, I work with this practice every day, and it's important to incorporate this practice. And it's actually a whole series of practices. But if we're not able to digest our lived experiences and emotional responses, we can be making use of all types of supplements, medicinal herbs, and diet. Now, this is important too, because for instance, there's no one thing that's going to address it all. For instance, there was a couple of people that I was working with, and I was normally digestive issues like colitis, Crohn's disease, IBS are easy from my standpoint to work with, but there are a couple of individuals, and they didn't seem anywhere near as responsive. And so there were some other dynamics going on. There's this leaky gut and this whole inflammatory gut brain axis thing. And I was like, oh God, and so I was educating myself even more and learning all this stuff about specific supplements and diet in terms of these inflammatory issues. And I've gone to like an anti-inflammatory diet, and I cut out grains and just eating protein and green vegetables. And so diet's an important part. So we need to combine, the best diet. And one of the things that I found is that I do more and more of my own work, is I do this deep level processing of the intensive meditation practices, the body work, as I go through the vision quest, the 4 days and nights on the mountains without food and water. My sensitivity increases a lot. So intuitively, I feel what foods my body needs. And my body's talking to me, it's like letting me know it doesn't like certain things, but I feel a strong pull or grab, like a inner feeling, like a compelling force, like, okay, this is what I want, this is what I need. And
so for the woman who's not even there yet, Ben, they're listening. This is the first conversation they had. It showed up. They're like, oh my goodness, this sounds good. And I'm tuning in. And they're saying, where do I actually begin? Because I'm nowhere near the intuitive part. I haven't fasted 4 days and 4 nights. I don't see the vision. Where do they actually start to begin right now after hearing our conversation?
Working with the practice I just described earlier. I think that's the best thing to start. Some of us, for instance, it can be of great benefit to work with a psychotherapist too, because there are a lot of people I find have a very limited understanding of the emotional wounding they carry, the profound dysfunction that they've grown up in, and that's playing out. Now, when I work with people individually, not everyone's working with a psychotherapist, and I end up having to function in multiple capacities, because the fact that, okay, here are these serious physiological issues that got to be addressed, and at the same time all these emotions are surfacing, and so I'm helping them to understand a lot of what's going on, patterns that are playing out in their relationships and what they carried from childhood, and in working with them to process these emotions. So some people, as I said, possibly working with a psychotherapist. There's doing the practices the practice like I described. You can reach out to me if you have questions, because if anyone in the audience, if you have questions, and I could be more specific, like I could take some time and listen to what's going on with you, and I can,
And that's what I wanted you to pretty much get to, Ben, because it's not something that people typically can just do themselves, because this is how they've always been. And so sometimes they need that guide or that support system to really help them understand the emotional wounds and the patterns that are filtered or fueled from those emotional wounds, those lived experiences, because maybe they're not all emotional, but those lived experiences. So then that way they understand what their body is carrying and how it's been going through and festered throughout their life, and where they are right now that might be impacting their health, their healing, and their habits. And so I'm really glad that we kind of spoke on that, because that's important, because it's not something that you should do by yourself, or you should have be able to do those things on your own. And so I want you to know that there are people, professionals, people, guides, coaches, they're ready to support you. You just have to find the right one that aligns with your methodology, your beliefs, your values, that you feel like are going to be effective for you. And so when people say, I've tried everything, there's no possible way, because there's too many different ways that you can heal and embark on this journey. But it's your healing, it's your journey. We're just here to remind you to give yourself the permission to go and heal. So Ben, we're getting into the Vitality Sparks round. So it's quick fire responses. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. What's one sign your body is asking for help?
There are so many. I mean, there's exhaustion.
There we go.
Sleeping.
Exhaustion. We'll go with that one. What's one daily practice every woman should begin today?
Again, that practice of bringing your awareness, acknowledging what's happening, what do you feel in response to it, where the feelings situated in your body, get in the depths of the feelings. You're not sending light, you're not trying to make it change, but there is an innate healing intelligence. And by being so present, as I'm describing, while breathing softly and deeply, it engages that innate healing intelligence. Another thing, though, is, exhaustion itself is that when you're experiencing depletion, exhaustion, you're just drained, and you bring your awareness to the depletion or exhaustion where it is situated in your body. I've done this a lot of times. You could be depleted or exhausted from overexerting yourself, like trying to save a relationship, where it could be your children, if they're acting out and they're doing like substance abuse and getting into all kinds of trouble and are trying to save your marriage or relationship, whatever. That can be extremely depleting.
I'm glad that you reminded us to look where in the body that exhaustion is being placed. But it's quick fire, rapid response. Come on, it's vitality sparks, Ben. Last one. Healing begins when?
Really, healing begins when, it's a combination. We need the intellectual understanding of exactly what we're dealing with. But then again, we need to be doing the deep level processing, bringing our awareness into our bodies. A lot of people are so disconnected, so dissociated. And we may not meet the clinical classification of someone with a dissociative disorder, but so many things we do. Let's say the foods we eat, just go in any supermarket and aisle after aisle of just garbage, and then refined sugar, and people smoke and consume alcohol. People are on all kinds of pharmaceuticals. Sometimes psychotropic medications may be the best known solution for some individuals, especially if they're a danger to themselves or others. But there are a lot of people that just, the fact that they never learn to work effectively with their emotions. And so all that backlog of overwhelm and trauma and just ordeals they've gone through, and it creates this residual, and they feel consumed by anxiety, or they're depressed. But the more we learn to work effectively with our own emotional responses and thoroughly digest our lived experiences and emotions, the more we can do that, then the body becomes lighter.
And I was going to say that, Ben, I was actually thinking, based on this conversation and what we've been able to really unpack, I knew that the end of the sentence, or I felt like the end of the sentence would have been, healing begins when you're able to truly digest your lived experiences. And so I feel like that would have been the sentence. And so when you said, I was like, okay, I'm learning. I got something from this conversation. And so I think it's definitely a vibe. So here we go, Ben, the last signature 2 questions for this episode. If you could give any words of advice, support, or insight to men, father figures, male role models, husbands, spouses, partners of those that are dealing with pelvic pain, fatigue, emotional burnout, women or children with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, what would you tell men that are around these women and children that they love that are experiencing these conditions? What would you say would be the one thing that they could do to be better a part of this support system and healing journey?
Educate yourself to start with. I mean,
okay,
really do the best you can to understand your partner, what they're experiencing within their bodies, what's playing out physically, the challenges they're facing. And there's culturally, over time, I think women have had a little more permission to feel, as opposed to men. There's like a lot of toxic cultural conditioning so that men stuff it, they contain it more, or just shut down, be stoic. And that could, as a man, the risk is it makes us less empathetic, less empathic, less aware, not only of ourselves, but of our partners. And so the more that we do this, I look back at my past, for instance, and just some of the stupid mistakes I made. And a lot of that was because I was so disconnected, so dissociative. at the time. And so much of my practice has been bringing more and more of my awareness in the body, and as digesting these successive layers of all this emotional backlog, then there is a lot more awareness, self-awareness, but also I pick up the signals. I'm not just dense. I'm not so obtuse. And so
I like it. I like that you're reminding men, males, brothers, father figures, male role models to not only educate themselves on the experiences or the lived experiences and challenges that these women and children are navigating through, but also become empathetic to those experiences and the issues and the conditions. Last question, Ben. If you could have a meal with any historical figure, who would it be and what would you all eat?
wow. It was hard to narrow it down to just one. I've trained in a number of different lineages. First with a traditional Native American doctor, and there were many extraordinarily powerful, gifted doctors over the centuries, and a lot of them you don't have historical records of. But some I know of from the stories that were passed down, the accounts from the native elders. And then also training with a master from China. And that is its own lineage, has its roots in Taoism. And there were many individuals within these Taoist lineages that possessed extraordinary gifts or powers, capabilities, and in the Hindu Vedic lineages as well. And so there are many of these individuals who have attained mastery, and I've been fortunate enough to have trained with several individuals and encounter some others, but there are many people.
So those would be the people you would want to have a meal with?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
like it would
I'm
actually be many meals, because I would gain
You can
different
only
things.
have one meal with all of these people you just mentioned in the lineages that you would like. You can have all of them, but you would have that one meal. What would that meal be, Ben?
What would that meal be? Wow. I'll be real honest about something. There's a part of me where I'm really ambiguous. Part of me would like to be completely vegan, just because I care deeply about animals and about the suffering. Yet my body seems to need the protein, so that's where I'm conflicted. If I could be completely vegan, I'd probably just do raw foods. Just
Okay.
yeah.
You would have a raw plant-based meal with those. Okay, I'm with it. I love it, Ben. Thank you. So Ben, let everybody know where they can connect with you, where they can find you.
There's my main website is benoofana.com. There's a contact form there, so that's probably the best way to reach out to me. If by chance you didn't hear from me, assume I didn't get the message and reach back again. I also have the Google Voice number 332-333-5155, which I don't know if you're overseas, it may be difficult to call. Or sometimes I'm overseas as well, but try both. You can find me on Instagram as well, and I have my YouTube channel with a lot of long form video. There's a lot of in-depth articles that I post on my on the blog section, which it just says articles. I should mention too that one thing I want to include: the traditional Native American doctors and other indigenous healers, we work as conduits, so we allow this extraordinarily powerful presence to work through us. So like I'll be working with people with a wide range of issues: heart disease, stroke, digestive, respiratory disorders, fibroids, ovarian cysts, injuries from automobile accidents or sports injuries. So it's pretty wide, as well as people going through breakup and divorce, anxiety, depression, trauma. So those of us who work as conduits, we allow this presence to work through us. And There are times where people are on the table and they feel this presence working within their body, doing reconstructive work on a physical level, and taking all this lived experience and emotion and transforming it so they can literally digest it. And as they digest it, and as this healing takes place, a new foundation is also emerging. Just a quick mention of that. Also, there's another website, teachmetomeditate.com, because I've developed this whole system of intensive meditation practices. And for someone going through breakup or divorce, if they're in the acute stage, if the relationship is blown up, they've been ghosted, there's breakupfirstaid.com and the deep dive, where patterns of abandonment, unrequited love, attachment wounds, we go much deeper in.
Those are very important aspects to really dive into, and I'm really glad you're mentioning those two, Ben.
And that website is Heal My Heartache.
Heal My Heartache. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, y'all, the Teach Me to Meditate website link is definitely going to be in the show notes. And then you can also make sure that you just hit pause and write these websites down, the phone number down for Ben, so you can make sure that you get connected with him. And so what I want to remind y'all is that today's conversation tells us about something important. Your body isn't betraying you. Your body isn't broken. And your body isn't working against you. It's communicating. The question is, are we willing to listen? Remember, your body is carrying what your life normalized. And healing begins when you stop abandoning yourself to keep everything else going and really focus on becoming aware of you. Until next time, y'all, keep choosing habits that heal, foods that fuel, and a life that honors what your body has been trying to tell you all along. It's your Healthy Habits and Lifestyle Coach Jovonnie, host of the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast. 4 vibrations. Check the show notes for all the good vibes and value. Thanks for vibing with me, y'all.